Ms. Hoffman, Derek.
Hey,
Hi,
Phil,
everyone.
thanks for joining us today. We're glad to have you here. And do you want to just start by just sharing why it is that you're running for City Council?
Lifelong resident, born in St. John's. I was never allowed to leave. My mother is 92 years old. She's still in Santa Monica as well. So I've been involved in volunteer efforts for the city, has either a school district or a city volunteer for the last 22 years. Before that, the Boys Club of Santa Monica, Boys and Girls Club of Santa Monica. I've spent half my life involved in volunteering to help children and teens and my neighbors. I'm frustrated at the direction that Santa Monica has taken. I've been frustrated for a while. You know, we don't pay attention to the residents who really need help. We are, I think, embarked on the wrong path in our city. And I can go more into that in a few minutes. But most importantly, I think we need a different perspective on our city council. I care deeply about our residents. It's been said that my blood is blue and gold with a touch of Santa Monica dirt. And that, I hope, regardless of which side of the political spectrum you're on in Santa Monica, I hope that comes through, that I love this city. And I love the people in this city. And that's why I've stayed here. That's why I'm willing to fight for Santa Monica. And that does not mean by any means ever an extremist on either side. I really think I'm somewhere in the great moderate middle of our civic life. But I really care about not only our history, but our present and where I believe we can go in the future.
Thank you so much. And so I wanted to ask you first about, you stated you agreed completely with the California Democratic Party platform. That platform has a very strong element of criminal justice. I wanted to see if you agree with this particular plank that says that we oppose criminalization of persons who commit low-level offenses due to homelessness or mental illness by directing them to public health and housing services rather than resorting to arrest. And additionally, just what are your broader thoughts with regard to the important issue of criminal justice reform here in Santa Monica?
Well, I think we have to do a little bit of both. So I am appalled every day that we don't have the social network that helps our least fortunate individuals. At the same time, our residents, I see so many videos and I see so much walking around my city, our city, every day that also appalls me. So look I think treatment is the answer, but as the mayor of Sacramento said the other day in an editorial, there are some people that we can offer them help and they're not willing to take any help. So we may have to change some of the state laws to help. At the same time, look at the felony drugs that we're seeing on our streets every day in Santa Monica. Some of the criminal behavior we're seeing in Santa Monica every day, where our residents are now afraid to walk their streets and alleys, where people are having things ripped off constantly. We've got to take action to stop that. So I agree that social justice and actual restorative justice has to be implemented, but it has to be real. It can't just be, we do, as a state, as a county, as a city, we do a lot of lip service. I'm really honestly tired of lip service. Let's actually do something to help the people who need help. But also we have to find a way to clean up our parks, clean up our streets, and we can't go on with business as usual anymore.
Got it. So the next thing I wanted to ask you about is, I've seen a lot of statements that you've made on social media that were speaking out against unions.
They're all lies.
well, you've said that unions, specifically hospitality worker unions, are too powerful at City Hall, and have also insinuated that they have interests that are in opposition to the residents of Santa Monica. So I want to, forgetting about developers for just a minute, specifically focusing on hotel workers unions, what kind of relationship do you think you would have with them as a council member?
So let me back that up just for a second. First of all, I want to let you know that my grandmother, Doris Cooper, moved to Santa Monica in the 1920s. And the job she had when I was a little kid was she was a motel maid on Ocean Avenue. So at $1.25 an hour, backbreaking work. So I am not anti-union. So I want to make this clear. I'm a member of SAG, AFTRA, Equity. I was a UTLA member. My father was a retail clerk, and the union local was just south of Santa Monica Boulevard on 2nd Street, local 1442. He walked out with them and worked for the union and carried picket signs. I walked out during a UTLA strike and carried picket signs. My office became the Santa Monica headquarters for the SAG-AFTRA strike in 2000, 2002. So I am pro-union. I am literally pro-union as much as anybody can be. I am concerned when Local 11 wants to promote hotel projects in Santa Monica that are not supported by a majority of the residents. So I want union jobs, but I also want every union job to be accepted and for the good of the community. So I don't know if there's a way to actually, I want to make that distinction really clear. If Local 11 is supporting better conditions for union workers in Santa Monica, I'm there. If there is a non-union hotel, the Shore, some of the other hotels in Santa Monica that are non-union, I want them unionized and I'll march to help do that. 100% clear on that matter. If Local 11 says, boy, we're in favor of a 21-story hotel, that would hurt the essence of Santa Monica's community, I will be opposed to it. I think that should give you an answer, but make no mistake about it. I am pro-union to my core. My first teaching job was at the corner of Venice and in half the school was in Venice, half in Santa Monica, St. Clement Elementary. I was fortunate. My class was literally on the border. My desk was in Santa Monica. But I moved as quickly as I could to a Los Angeles Unified School because the fact that UTLA was going to be there and I was going to have a union job that would afford me medical benefits, a potential pension, etc. So I am pro-union, and my grandmother, I remember being 4 and 5 years old and my grandmother coming home to her house and her back hurt every day. And there were no benefits and very few tips. She was at the Travel Lodge and another hotel on Santa Monica, on Ocean, just south of Santa Monica Boulevard. My family is union. My grandfather was a butcher, non-union, until he could finally get union benefits at the Ralph's on the corner of 3rd and Wilshire, which became Europa, and now, and then Barnes and Noble, and I'll be quiet. Michael, thank you.
Yeah.
I saw the flash.
Okay,
yeah, Mike, go ahead.
I was actually raising my hand for John, but I do want to pivot to another issue, and I'm sure will come as no surprise to you. I want to talk about housing and affordable housing in particular.
Michael, you would want to talk about housing?
Exactly. So I looked at your questionnaire, and correct me if I got anything wrong, but you're concerned about the issue of homelessness. You're concerned that the lack of affordability that's preserved in the city, but you also oppose Proposition 21, which would allow us to extend rent control to more units and also limit the vacancy increases on the ones we have so they don't go to the skyrocket current thing. And with homelessness, unlike the past, if one looks at the most recent LA County homelessness thing, it says that 2/3 of the people are experiencing homelessness for the first time, principally because of economic conditions, which is largely driven by the cost of housing. And we've placed tons of people into housing, but we're putting more people on the street because of the housing crisis than we're able to house. So what is your proposal to solve that conundrum? If it's not to impose rent control, if it isn't to come up with some way to build more affordable housing or the like, what is your plan?
Well, I want to focus to some extent on Santa Monica. So, in Santa Monica, I think we have made our price inflation much worse by the construction of the new 5 to 8 story apartment houses in the Great Canyon of Lincoln Boulevard on 5th and 6th Street. And I know this because if your mom and pop landlord in Santa Monica who's had 7 units or 6 units for the last 20, 30, 50 years, and you've had older tenants in there who have been paying $1,000, $1,500 a month, and now you look at these new apartment houses going up with rents of $3,500, $4,000 a month minimum for a smaller apartment than yours, you want to jump those rents, and you're trying to pray that that person either moves, dies, something happens to them terribly. That's a horrible thing. So look, I believe in adaptive reuse. I fought for the San Vicente Historic District to make sure that we protected over 48 apartment houses on my street, because it was a better way for people to live. And a landlord bought in 9 units, 9 buildings one day alone. And those 9 buildings, when he bought into them, he was the owner of United Oil Company. Well, he was going to do what he could to get rid of those tenants. And we managed to landmark that district, and we landmarked it to preserve their housing. So I am concerned about, yes, the price inflation. I am concerned about any conditions that stop our seniors from living in place. I'm concerned about our neighborhoods being torn asunder by increased housing prices, by new construction. And I know the philosophy is, boy, we need housing. But Santa Monica right now has about a 9.9% vacancy rate. I've read anywhere from 8% to 9.9. There are apartment units available. People are being priced out. And in Santa Monica, I know the theory is, boy, if we reinstall strict rent control, it will control that. But I also see the stories of apartment owners who won't fix up their apartments because they're not making any money unless they sell. I don't want those older building owners to sell, because they're the ones who keep our prices affordable in the city. So I think there has to be a compromise. I'm not opposed to a reasonable full vacancy decontrol being put back on, but 5% a year. If Kevin McEwen has been living in his apartment house for 30 some odd years and is paying roughly $1,000 a month now, that landlord has lost money on Kevin McEwen and maybe being able to pay his water bill and utility bill, but no profit for 30 years. How do you also be fair to the apartment owner? How do you find a way to be fair to both sides? That's what I'm concerned about. That's why I looked at Proposition 21 and felt that the 15%, if I'm incorrect, stop me, but the 15% total increase over 3 years would not be enough to help those landlords fix their stairs, fix the building up, paint the building, and make sure that if a new tenant needs a new carpet, that they can actually have the money to put that carpet in without going into debt. I don't want the current landlords in the city to sell, because every time they sell, you get a hungry new person with a high mortgage who wants to speculate. We have to stop the speculation in our city. And that's, to me, that's what's destroying it. Michael, did I answer part of your question?
You did, and I'm going to cede to my colleagues, but I do want to correct one thing since you asked.
Yes.
All Prop 21 does is restore the possibility that we in Santa Monica could choose to impose 15%. We could choose to make it 20%. We could choose to make it 30%. We could choose to make it 15% or 30% for a Kevin McEwen situation and 15% for that. So it's about whether local control is restored to us as to how we set it.
So Michael,
right now we can't do anything.
Michael, I might be willing to adapt my position.
Okay.
What I was concerned about is the draconian changed that still doesn't allow people with older apartment houses to be able to update those and be able to I've talked to landlords over the years who say all they want to do is, God, the only way they're going to make any money is sell. That worries me.
And in fairness to my colleagues, I'd be happy to talk to you more about this offline.
And Michael, I'd love to, because my position is not in concrete. And actually, you just gave me some good information that I didn't see. So thank you.
Okay, thanks, Phil. Let's go to Derek Devermont next.
So you were talking and you mentioned something about that your goals are to keep Santa Monica affordable. My question to you, and then you also talked about, I think your grandmother who made a dollar, you said $1.25 is what she started at?
$1.25 an hour. It may have been $1.10, but $1.25 an hour as a hotel maid.
Okay.
And they were lucky. They came here in the 20s. My grandfather my mother's father was an illegal alien who jumped ship in New York and got a green card. My grandmother was an immigrant to the country. They made it to Santa Monica. My grandfather cut off his index finger to try and keep my mother alive. He was working in a slaughterhouse. And the only way he thought he could keep my mother and my grandmother fed when she was 3, he cut off his left index finger. I never knew how he did it until last year. He lied to me for the entire time I knew him. But they were hard scrabble people, and they managed to buy a lot and then a second lot in Santa Monica. And that was enough to sustain them the rest of their lives.
So, and then you mentioned about your goal to keep Santa Monica affordable. My question to you then is, if your grandmother were here today working as a hotel maid, making the equivalent wage for today, where in Santa Monica would it be affordable for her to live?
She wouldn't be. She would live in Hawthorne or Lawndale or South LA. She wouldn't be able to live in Santa Monica. And Derek, I'm not sure that we can, even with Community Corp, even with doing as much as we do for the community, I'm not sure we can ever solve that. The price of land and the price of speculation here is so high. One thing we can do is put in height limits. Height limits will force down speculation because the price of the dirt won't be quite as expensive. And I know that's an unpopular thing, but I'm just letting you know that. Look at my grandmother would not have been able to live here. My grandfather wouldn't have been able to live here. And yes, I would be saying I'm from some maybe red and green dirt somewhere else in California. And look at, they almost didn't make it as it is. I mean, you know.
That's kind of my point. It's not about keeping Santa Monica affordable. It's about that it's not. And maybe measures need to be taken to make it affordable. And the prop on that might be the best way. That's all.
And Derek, I'm not necessarily disagreeing. What Michael told me will allow me to alter my position, because my object is to be fair to the people who live here and fair to the people who want to live here in the future. So I don't want this to become, I said the other day, a slightly senior Newport Beach and a council person corrected me and said, actually, we're maybe East Beverly Hills. And I don't want to be either. I want to be distinctly Santa Monica. And I don't want us to become Newport Beach. I don't want us to become, quote unquote, a slightly seedier Beverly Hills. I want us to be a city that takes care of our people. And Derek, I don't know if we have an answer on how to make the area affordable. I would like us to see us build when we're building low cost apartments and when we're allowing market rate apartments to be built, that there are more family units. Our school district, I think, is suffering because we're not building a community for the next generation. We're not building enough housing that allows families to live here. And yes, they have to be able to live here at less than $4,000, $5,000 a month. That's an incredible amount of money. And if someone has to make $120,000 just to have an apartment here, then we've lost our sense of community.
Last question, and I apologize. Should affordable housing be available to undocumented people?
People are people.
Okay.
So my grandmother and grandfather owned an apartment house on 9th and one on 12th. They never asked anybody for citizenship papers. They asked if they could pay the rent and they could live there. I sure as hell never want to see our landlords become ICE workers.
Okay, thank you so much, Phil. We got to move on to our next guest, but we really appreciate you coming by today.
Okay. All right. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.
You too.